everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. You're here for the panel discussion, Black Panthers, Tales of Wakanda, and you're in for a treat. I'm Dr. Rashanice Candy Tate, Assistant Director for the Center for Creativity and Arts at Emory. Emory Arts is a proud co-sponsor of this discussion, and we're pleased that you can find us on arts.emory.edu and like us on social media. I want to take a moment to say thank you to Dr. Kim McMillan for bringing this opportunity to us. If you don't know, my research area is the Black Arts Movement, and Kim and I met at Dillard University at a conference. And so it's important that the literary role of the South has played a big part in BAM, in the Black Arts Movement. Artists like Hoyt Fuller, Toni Cade Bambara, locally Alice Lovelace, and Iban Dewey were all integral players, held conferences, had writers' workshops at the Neighborhood Arts Center in the 1970s, and even collaborated with Emory in the English department in the 80s. I also want to thank the Atlanta branch of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH, who is a program partner with us. You can find ASALH on www.asalh.org. But ASALH annually sets the Black History Month programs, and locally the Atlanta branch sponsors MLK Day programs, the Malcolm X Day, Juneteenth, ASALH Founders Day in September, and also Carter G. Woodson's birthday is celebrated in December. And I want to thank Mr. Sean Jones for being our proud partner in the Atlanta branch of ASALH. So now it brings me a great honor, privilege to present our moderator for today's panel, Dr. Clint Fluker. Dr. Fluker serves as the curator of African American collections at the Stewart A. Rose Library at Emory University, where he develops dynamic archival collections and innovative programs about African American history and culture. Dr. Fluker is also an affiliate professor of American Studies and Digital Humanities at Clark Atlanta University, where he teaches a course on digital humanities and contemporary movements in Black speculative fiction. Fluker is also the co-editor of the Black Speculative Art Movement, Black Futurity, Art and Design, which is a collection that enters the global scholarly debate on the emerging field of Afrofuturism studies, which we're going to talk about today. As a visual artist, Dr. Fluker has most recently has been included in New York Live, an Art 2020 exhibit, Curating the End of the World, where his interdisciplinary pieces were presented as meditations on the themes of memory and fragmentation. Thank you, Clint, for being our partner for this panel today. Tell us more about Emory's collection.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tate. I really appreciate that. And again, everybody, my name is Clint Fluker. And first, I'd just like to welcome you all to what is going to be a great Friday evening conversation about all things Black Panther, as we celebrate these writers and their contributions to this landmark anthology, Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda, edited by Jesse Holland. It's a great book. I love it. The authors are amazing, and I can only hope that there is more to come. I'd also like to take this time to thank a few people. First, the panelists, Linda Addison, Glenn Parris, Milton Davis, Kyoko M. You're all amazing, incredible writers, and I know that you're very busy because you got books to write. So you've given us your time, and I appreciate that. Kim McMillan for making this possible. Dr. Tate in the Atlanta chapter of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History for your support. And a special shout out to the communications and outreach teams. who worked on this, Lolita Rowe at Rose Library, and in particular, Caroline Corbett, who made the amazing flyer that is the background for Dr. Tate in the background here. It was really something, and that's what brought us all here this evening. So thank you, Caroline. So before we jump into the conversation, I just want to orient this evening for a moment to just tell you a bit about why we at Emory are so excited about this event. Black Panther and Wakanda, this book, really speak to me to what is possible. The Black Panther comic is an ongoing, vast tapestry that allows us to expand our imaginations and think toward a future beyond our wildest dreams. And this message, this theme, is especially important for people of African descent. But in order for us to imagine our collective futures, we must also be keenly aware of our past. And that is why I work at Emory's Stuart A. Rose Library, where I serve as the curator of African American collections. Rose Library documents, preserves, and makes accessible a variety of historical materials ranging from African American history, modern politics, rare books, literature, poetry, and in my collecting area of African American history and culture, a diverse array of materials that attempt to tell the full story of Black life in this country. The areas that we focus on include, but are not limited to, Black art and theater, print culture, civil rights, religion, sports, and some of these collections include the papers of noted individuals like Alice Walker, Kathleen Cleaver, and Benny Andrews. Can you see why I'm so hype about this? It's amazing to do this kind of work. I just get excited about it, just talking about it. Our collections are available to the public online, as well as through in-person visits, excluding measures taken during the pandemic, and through amazing programming, just like this event. We have podcasts, exhibits, and a host of dynamic digital projects. So I hope you'll visit our website so you can learn more about how to access the collection and programs like this one. But most notably for this conversation, we have a Black comic book collection. That's right, Kyoko. We got a Black comic book collection. I see you smiling. We focus primarily on Black authored independent comics, such as Brother Man series by Dawood Onyebuele and Guy Sims, and Genius by Afua Richardson, most notably of Lovecraft Country fame. Other creators include John Jennings and Stacey Robinson, and we have a sizable run of the Dwayne McDuffie-led Milestone comics from the early 90s. So please, when you get the chance, make a visit. So we're really excited about this event tonight, as you can tell, and we really thank you for spending your time with us. So without further ado, I'm going to begin the conversation. But just as a note, I'll ask questions until I am thoroughly satisfied with all the answers from these people, and then we'll open it up. And what we'll do is we'll have Dr. Candy Tate and Kim McMillan kind of facilitate that. But I just want to turn our attention to these amazing panelists one more time: Linda Addison, Glenn Parris, Milton Davis, Kyoko M, and just give them a round of applause to get us started. So you're all very accomplished. You're all so talented. And I get jealous just looking at you on the screen. And so for that reason, rather than just list all of your accolades, I would love if our first question could be to each one of you, starting with Linda. Can you please provide a brief introduction and tell us what inspired you to be part of this project? I'll unmute you.
Okay. Wow. Who would not be inspired to be part of this project? I'm just saying. But the quick version of my resume is that I've been writing speculative stuff for 50 years, 40 years, something ridiculous. I was the first Black to win the Horror Writers Association Bram Stoker Award. I've received 5. I also have received a Lifetime Achievement from them and Mentor of the Year. And the end of last year, to my great shocking surprise, I was made Grand Master of Poetry by the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association. I grew up oldest of 9 with no books in the house, but a mom who did not graduate from high school, but told us stories all the time. So I just never got that, creative imagination beat out of me from beginning to the end. I have a BS in math from Carnegie Mellon, and I worked in computers until 7 years ago when I retired and moved from New York to Arizona. So that's the overview of the resume.
Thank you.
Oh, did you want me to talk about getting into the anthology, or you want to come back to that?
Just really what inspired you to be a part of it.
I was invited, man. Are you kidding? And
Wow.
I was like, I got a communication from Jesse Holland, and I was just, at the time I was fighting long hauling COVID, so I didn't know if I could actually do it, but I was like, I gotta try. So it's such a shining light in my life and career to be in this with such incredible other writers.
Thank you. Kyoko?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kyoko M. I am from Atlanta. I was born and raised here. I got my Bachelor of Arts in English Literature from University of Georgia. And I started, I've much like Linda Addison, I had parents who were very, very insistent on, they read us books nightly, encouraged us to read comic books. I was joking with a friend the other day that they used to just drop us off at the library for a whole day, and not like as a punishment. We loved it. We would just like run in there and be good like the whole day. It was like babysitting. They would just drop us off for 12 hours and we'd be fine. So that's how influential writing has been to me as a hobby, a love. I started, my first book is called The Black Parade, and it was published in 2013. So I self-published through Amazon, Smashwords, and Kindle Direct Publishing. And so I have two separate series. And as far as the anthology is concerned, the very wonderful and considerate Glenn Parris extended the opportunity to me. He mentioned that they were accepting submissions, and I was like, who the heck am I? I'm not good enough for this, but I'm darn sure gonna take that chance. So I shot my shot to Jesse J. Holland, and I sent him my premise, and he was like, nope, sounds great, write it. And so it was hilarious too, because it was a little bit towards the end of the year. And so I had a very tight deadline. I think I had to turn mine in 3 days or something.
Wow.
It was very immediate. Yes, but I was like, no, I can handle this. It's only 5,000 words, no worries. I literally sat down. So I did my research session the day before, absorbed as many comics as I could, Wikipedias and all these other great things to get the lore down, since we were specifically instructed to write from the comics and not from the film universe. And so after I did that, I just, pounded, put my words down and sent it back, and he loved it, as did Marvel. So that is how I ended up.
Thank you. Glenn? Glenn, you're on mute. Still on mute.
Okay, how about now?
There you go.
Good? Okay. So I was on a panel with Jesse Holland at Dragon Con, and at the end of the panel, he mentioned that he was putting together an anthology. And while everybody's up there, I said in front of everybody, it's like, can I get in on that? And he kind of looked me up and down. It's like, who is this guy? It's like, yeah, sure, send me something. So I guess as far as invitations, Linda got an invitation. I did a home invasion. I just kicked the door in and just, submitted something. But he thought it was okay, and he just, he sent me basically a 2-word response. You're in, and that's all I can remember about it. And I just, ran with it from there. But I just got so excited about writing for the Black Panther. I read the first comic book when I was a kid back in the '60s. And I was just amazed that this African king had a $20 million bench that Reed Richards sat on. And I clearly remember that, over 50 years later, I remember that. And I was just thrilled to write it. I mean, the ask that I had of Jesse was a reflex. I didn't even think. I didn't have an idea in mind. I didn't even think. I just said, I want to be in on that. it's also nice to be back at Emory. It's been about 30 years since I've had anything to do with Emory. I trained there, I taught there, I taught at Morehouse as well. And it was a pleasure of my life. It was a source of material when I wrote my first medical fiction novel, The Renaissance of Aspirin. And I'm just honored to be back on the campus, even if it's virtual.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Milton Davis.
Okay, hey everybody, my name is Milton Davis. I am a Black speculative fiction author, owner of MV Media, a publishing company that specializes in science fiction and fantasy based on African diaspora culture and traditions. Very happy to be here. My secret identity, I am a chemist. I've been a chemist for over like 30 years now. I've been writing since 2008. Published about 21 novels, 9 anthologies, been nominated for a couple of British Science Fiction Association awards. And so I've been out there for a little bit. As far as my background is concerned, I'm like everybody, I kind of like Kyoko M. I found out about, Glenn had talked to me about the anthology probably about a year before I finally heard from Jesse. And I was kind of one of those things where it's kind of like, okay, do you want to be in this? You got 3 weeks, something like that kind of thing. And I was like, I didn't have a lot of background on Black Panther. I knew about Black Panther. Most of my experience came from the movie. But when I saw the lineup of authors that were going to be in the book, Linda, Kyoko M, Glenn, Tananarive, Dew, I knew most of them. And then I saw I can't even think of the name. I'm choking up now. But anyway, I wanted to be in the book. So
Nikki Giovanni.
No, yeah, Nikki Giovanni. And when I saw Nikki Giovanni, I was done. I was like, I said, no matter what else happens in my life, if I have the worst story in the book, I can still say I was in the book with Nikki Giovanni. So that was my thing. But yeah, so got a chance to submit a story. It was accepted. And to me, it's a matter of just what Black Panther represents, what it has come to represent for Black fans of speculative fiction, and what it has become over the years, what it has evolved into. I mean, we know about Stan Lee and creating the character, but seeing the input from people like Reginald Hunlin and other people that have actually, to me, brought the Blackness to the subject. And incorporated so much African history and culture into it, and which, as a sword and soul writer, that's my wheelhouse, and that's what I do. So I was very excited about doing it, and I'm glad that I was able to get a story in there and be with you guys today.
Thank you so much, and I can't wait for you to tell us a little bit more about what you mean by put a little Blackness in the subject. I got to hear more about that. Let's start with this question. Y'all can just sort of jump in as you feel. When were you first introduced to the world of Wakanda and Black Panther? And I think, Glenn, you kind of started in this area. And how did it compare to other stories featuring superheroes of African descent that you were familiar with? Yes, please.
Ooh, you got all the power. That's cool.
Yeah,
somebody got to. Like others have said, I knew of the comic books, but I just knew it from the movies and Black Panther showing up in the different movies and its own movie, and what an incredible impact it made on the world, to show the entire planet interested in seeing a version of a Black Africa, of a culture and a society that is powerful and human. I'm getting chills now just saying it. It was just such an incredible thing. There's nothing that could, at this point, compare to that. So actually, I had 7 days to write my story, and I'm a poet for the most part. So yeah,
Wow.
7 days was not an easy deal. I was like, okay. And when I got contacted, like I said, I was fighting chronic fatigue and headaches and stuff. And I was just like, I don't know if I can do this. And then I just finished watching about our Black Panther dying and a thing on TV, and I was crying. And then I get this contact and I was like, yo, I guess I gotta try. So I did a lot of what others said. I went back and looked at the comic books. Since I wrote about the Dora Milaje, there was not much about them in training. So that was my pull to do what I did. But I went through all the comics that were available online. So.
Thank you. You want to go?
Well, for me, it was kind of similar to Linda. I grew up around comic book fans. My cousin is a big comic book collector. My best friend is. I spent hours and hours in comic book stores while they read like 20 comic books and bought one. So you know, I had the experience without actually being deep into it like they were. And Black Panther's always been there. And like Linda says, you know, he wasn't just a Black superhero character in the whole pantheon. He was a very powerful, the leader of his own nation. And it was obvious that, you know, he had that foundation. And then when you saw, or I don't know if any of you guys saw Reginald Hunland's animation series, he took it up to another level. As far as who Black Panther was and the standing of him among, you know, other people. So writing Sword and Soul, which is basically sword and sorcery based on African traditions, when I went to see the movie, for me, it was something that I always wanted to see. I could identify with the different cultures that were being represented in the movie because I had used some of those same cultures as sources for my stuff. And I'm sitting in the movie, and they're in the capital city of Wakanda, and I'm sitting there with my wife. I'm like, you know, hey, they got that from Yoruba culture. They got that from Zulu culture. And my wife's like, shut up and watch the movie. And so that was what was so exciting about it to me, was to be able to see all that symbolism being incorporated into the movie, and knowing that Ryan Coogler and everybody else had done their homework when they made this movie, as far as representing the different cultures in Africa and in the diaspora. And then there was really, you know, the connection about Chadwick Boseman, knowing what he was going through while he was making that movie. And to me, it was kind of a way to recognize that and honor him, to be able to participate in this movie. And the story I chose was a story about Bashenga, who was the first Black Panther, and was a story that T'Challa told to a man named Mr. Small in one of the situations. And he told the story briefly, and it kind of resonated to what I write. So I wanted to go back and flesh that story out. Like I just heard a saying recently, the past is always present. And so to me, that's why I emphasize stuff in the past, because, you know, that explains a lot to us about how things are today. And writing about that story, to me, would hopefully kind of give a little bit more solid foundation about some of the things occurring in Wakanda in the present. Particularly, one thing I played with was how the Wakandans figured out how to manipulate vibranium. So if you get a chance to read the story, you know, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was an amazing story. And I was wondering how you would think about all of the African culture and the African symbolism that was in the movie, because that's a major part of your work for sure.
Exactly. It's you know, it's when you position Wakanda physically where it should be, when you look at the maps, you see all the cultures Wakanda was in contact with Kushite culture and Kemet culture and then Abyssinian culture and all these different kingdoms that existed in East Africa. And it just kind of, there's so much richness there. And you know, to me, like the story there was just kind of a beginning point, and it just can go into so many different directions.
Kyoko, when were you introduced to Black Panther?
So I had a little bit of an introduction probably from when I was a kid. My dad and my cousin had the largest comic book collection that I had access to as a kid. So I ended up reading a lot of X-Men. I ended up reading a handful of DC stuff, so like the Death of Superman and the Versus comic, which I would love to see done in like a really updated way. I think that would be a lot of fun because I don't know if any of you guys read that one, but like some of the matchups were really good, but some of them were like really lopsided. Like to take a tangent, like because it always confused me. There was one that was like Gambit and Nightwing. I was like, that's not fair. No, not Nightwing. He's one of my favorites. I love him, but I was like, some of the 90s matchups were not cool, and then they also kind of made it more like popular, like a popularity contest. So whoever they voted for decided is the one that would win. And some of them are like, you know what, Jubilee versus Robin, another one. I was like, that doesn't seem entirely fair. I'm just gonna,
Oh man, we got a bona fide scholar on our hands right here. You know
but those are the things that I grew up with. And so I had seen a little bit of Black Panther based on, because my dad is a huge comic fan as well. And so he probably had one or two of those when I was growing up that I got to read through. But like a lot of people, and in a tangential way. So my dad went to school with a gentleman named Jock Thorne. I think people call him Jeff. I know Jock my whole life. And if any of you know who Jock Thorne is, he is currently the person who's in charge of the animated Black Panther series.
Yes.
And so he's kind of like my unofficial surrogate dad.
Wow.
So the other reason I have a connection to the Black Panther was just because, again, he and I had just been, again, he linked up, my dad linked me up with him, and we just chit chat on occasion. And so that was another connection to the character as well, is getting to see it through the lens of how Jock portrays it in the animated series. But largely it was the film for me. I had always been aware of T'Challa and of some of the other characters, but that was my kind of like the biggest, I think, influence of what I saw from the character. And then my story is called Usubamba, and that is about Okoye being given a case where there's been a child who was kidnapped, and she is trying to bring the girl home to her mother safely before they try to traffic her outside of Africa.
Wow. Your story actually reminded me of like the beginning of the Black Panther movie, where there's another story going on with Lupita's character, and you're like into a mystery, but you don't get to see the whole thing. So I just loved your story, your contribution. Thank you.
Yeah, I really thought it was important. And in terms of also awareness, like, I mean, I don't really want to have like a full agenda, but I did kind of have an agenda because that's something that I think is very important, that people are aware of how much of a problem human trafficking is. And especially here in Atlanta, you see signs about it all the time, that it's a pretty serious issue, and people need to just kind of keep it in the back of their minds that if there are ever any signs, and you should definitely, if you see someone in need and help, you gotta respond to it immediately.
Absolutely. Now, Glenn, you started talking a little bit about this. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh, sure. So, I was into comics back in the 60s and 70s. When I got into college and medical school, of course, time is not your friend anymore. But I always loved the Black Panther. I always put characters into the roles of animated characters so that I sort of, keep them honest, so to speak. And I always sort of saw Sidney Poitier as the Black Panther back in the 60s and 70s. It just fit. I took a course in African history and African heritage in college. And I'm not going to cite the years to date myself, but it was a little while ago. But I, like Milton and Kyoko, I used, and Linda, I used a lot of that as a reference. If you are the king or the prince of a superpower, and that was a true superpower, the Wakanda nation, the excellence that they display on a regular basis that's the norm. There's nothing extraordinary about that. He's a genius. He doesn't wake up and say, look in the mirror and say, I'm a genius. He just is. And that's what I wanted to portray in my story. I wanted to portray somebody who was worldly in his knowledge. He spoke the languages that were important And those are the languages of his neighboring nations in Central Africa. He also had a responsibility to deal with the other superpower in the world, and that was Atlantis. And my story started around 1912. And it was sort of an interesting time. It was the time that Harriet Tubman was on her deathbed, and she was known as Moses. And I cited that in the story as one of the war dogs. And I like to pull in history when I write, and I do that with a lot of things that I write. I wanted to mention that they were beginning to play with atomic energy and radioactivity. And they knew even in 1912 that this was going to be a problem in the future. And they had a feeling that it was going to be the French and the German and the Americans that were going to be a problem. So they were already looking into that and then trying to keep that from causing friction with Atlantis. So I really liked, the geopolitics of Wakanda, in addition to just the intellectual and just the technological advantages that they had. And I wanted to show how far ahead they were of Western culture by showing that they had massive airships that could cloak. Even then, they had transistor powered computers at the time. They had grappling poles with electromagnets, just things that hadn't even been dreamt of in Western culture. And, they just took it in stride. I wanted to put that into the story.
I think what's so amazing about your story and everybody's story in this volume is that so much of the Black Panther comic book leading into most recent history was about Black Panther, who's the king and the leader of an African nation, spending all of his time in the U.S. fighting, U.S. battles and just that. So this idea of like a geopolitics of interacting with Wakanda itself, and also working with neighboring nations was just like not part of the canon until very recently. So I think it's really cool to read these stories and see how you've weaved in history from around the world, technology, and contemporary events, but also placed it into the world that Black Panther actually comes from, and what T'Challa has to face, or whatever period of history the Black Panther is facing. I had another set of questions that I find very interesting, so I'll just go with it. In your experience, what effect does this book and other properties featuring Black superheroes have on society? And in other words, like, why is it important to produce these kinds of stories? Yes, please, go for it.
I'm still working to overcome my shyness here. So,
Oh.
like me. As I mentioned, I've been writing in speculative horror science fiction for many, many years. And for the most part, there was just no representation of Black, of women. I mean, it was just a whole lot of not, And why I stayed in it is because that's just the way my imagination rolled. I couldn't really do anything different. So I think what's so important is that as we are creating stories like this book, and all the work that all the other people in this panel and in the book and outside the book are creating, it's a way of saying to the world that we're here. We've been here, even though we've been ignored, even though we've been erased. And even though it's still a struggle just to walk down the street and not be killed for no good reason, we're still here. And so writing about the future, writing about some imaginative areas, it doesn't ignore the past and it doesn't ignore the present, but it presents this positive energy of existing and creativity and imagination. And I think there's nothing more important than that. Well, there is more important, but that's very important.
I'll go next. I was going to say, to me personally, what I think it's important to be represented and to be seen. When I was real small, I was going to say that really, aside from like the comics, the only exposure I really had seeing women of color in a position where they were the main lead for something like Disney. So, you know, things like Pocahontas or Esmeralda from back then. And so even though those weren't accurate or anything like that, I felt a little closer to the character saying, oh, cool, look, this is a woman of color who's in the center of the story. And so that's something that I think expands out into why this is important for it to be Black superheroes written by Black people, filmed by Black people, the costumes done by Black people. All of that comes together so that you have younger generations who are going to grow up and feel seen, feel represented, and say, hey, oh, actually, it isn't just me. Look, that's me up there. There was a really adorable video that was going around when the Shang-Chi trailer dropped. There was this little kid who couldn't have been more than, I don't know, 2 or 3 years old. And he was sitting in the chair watching the trailer for the first time. And he said, Mama, look, he's like me. He's like me. That's what I think is important. In order to open up more futures, people need to see that Black people are here, that we're writing these types of stories, that we've always been here, that there's a history behind it. But mostly, like I said, to me, I think it's really important to encourage the present people who are writing and the future writers.
Thank you.
Well, one of the reasons I started writing was because I wanted to create characters that looked like me. And the reason I became a self-publisher, because I wanted to do that without any interference from any other people in the industry. I didn't want agents telling me that I needed to write my stories a certain way. I didn't want editors telling me that I needed to write my stories a certain way. I had a story I wanted to tell. I had stories I wanted to tell. I had a way I wanted to tell them, and I wanted the readers to see them exactly the way that I did them. Also, because of the fact I looked at the time, I researched the industry, and I felt like the stories that I wanted to write probably wouldn't be accepted by the attitude that was going on at the time. When we write our stories, you know, we bring an element to them that other people can't access, and because of what those subjects mean to us. And from what I've seen in the industry, that when people want us to write about something, they're always taking a look at. They're always keeping their eye on another.
I was joking with the other day. I was like, you need to clone yourself, dude. There's just too much. He's so ambitious. He has like 90 projects going on. There he is. Speak of the devil.
Hola.
In the saddle.
Milton, how you doing, man?
All right. Sorry, I just got back from work, home from work.
And what did I say 5 minutes ago? I was joking with the other day. I was like, you need to clone yourself, dude. There's just too much. He has like 90 projects going on.
I would like in on that cloning program too, because
I'm
trying to get 28 hours of work out of 24.
All right. I just got back from work,
So yeah, I'm hearing an echo in a repeat.
Yeah, I'm hearing that too.
I was joking with the other day. I was like, you need to clone yourself, dude. There's too much.
We're all echoing.
I would like in on that cloning program too, because I'm trying to get 28 hours of work out of 24.
All right.
Well, somebody recorded it.
All right, I just got back from work,
So yeah, I'm hearing an echo.
Yeah, I'm hearing that too.
I was joking with the other day. I was like,
we're gonna have to put ourselves on mute except for the one talking. You're gonna get the feedback. And in the chat, there's a request for closed captioning.
Okay.
Somebody recorded it.
All right, just got back from work, so.
I'm hearing an echo.
Let me see what I can do. Candy?
We're gonna have to put ourselves on mute except for the one talking. You're gonna get the feedback. And in the chat, there's a request for closed captioning.
Okay, let me see if I can do that. Candy, let me see. Let me see what I can do. Yeah. Candy, what is the name of the site? Can I send it to you? can I send it to you to put into ASA?
Yes.
Can I send? Okay,
Let me see. I can do that.
okay.
Can,
Can,
let me see. Let me see what I can do.
You know, I wrote, you know, that novel, and like Milton, passed it around and got a lot of don't know where we would market it kind of thing. You know, so I put it out myself. I self-published, and you know, did well in the Atlanta market, and you know, I went to a couple of other markets and you know, did okay. But I didn't write anything again for, you know, another what, you know, 15, 20 years. And in a different genre. But, you know, I've followed Kyoko M, I've followed Milton. One of the reasons why I brought their names up was because, you know, just fantastic writing, indie writing, fantastic marketing. They put the whole thing together. You know, when you're an indie writer, you've got to do the artwork, the marketing, the research, the writing, the editing, the quality assurance, and Kyoko does it well, and Milton does it well, but he does it well, not just for himself, he does it well for many people. You know, Milton has published a lot of indie authors, a lot of them. And, you know, that's a jump off point for a lot of unpublished authors. You know, and I always tell them, take your time, write what you want to write, learn from people who've done it before. You know, Milton's got a day job, he's a scientist. Kyoko's just a genius. I don't know what she does. I don't know if she's got a secret bat cave somewhere that she invents stuff, but she's just brilliant. You know, and there are others. I would have mentioned many others to Jesse, but I didn't want to get my story knocked out. You get too many Kyoko M's, too many Milton Davises. You know, it's like Gwen Parris, who? Gone. So, but I just want to give big ups to you know my co-writers who I've admired for so many years, with so much talent. Black science fiction is something that is told through the lens of someone who has lived through the diaspora. There's nobody else who can see the things that we see the way we see them. And for me, the notion that African exceptionalism is an exception as opposed to the rule is unthinkable. And that's what Wakanda means to me. And I think that's what it means to a lot of intellectuals. I tell you, you know, it's a comic book, but I went to a large African-American medical meeting a couple of years ago, and it was a Wakanda-themed story, and you saw physicians from 30 years old to 90 years old, all participating and buying into Wakanda, the Wakanda salute, the Wakanda dress, you know, accolades to Chadwick Boseman's character. And, you know, you just don't see people of that stature and that age group worshiping a comic book. There's something deeper. There's something much, much deeper. And this is something that's pulling us all together, I think. This is the magnet. I don't know if it's vibranium or what, but it is drawing everybody worldwide to look at us in a different way. And it's about during time.
Now, many of you mentioned that you wrote your own stuff before, like whether it was independently, and it was a struggle to work with the market. And Milton, I like what you were saying, where you're like, I just wanted to write stuff that I wanted to write. You've always said that. I've sat on many panels with you. That's your line. It's true. You write what you want to write. I'm curious what it's like for people like yourselves, where you've been very successful doing your own stories. What's it like writing for another property? Particularly one that's so popular like Black Panther and managed by Marvel Studios. So what was it like writing in this way, and how did it affect your writing process?
So can you guys hear me? I switched my audio to a different port. Is that good?
That's great.
Perfect.
Wonderful. All right. I'll jump in first because I'm a little bit of the baby of the group, so maybe this is why. But so I had practice because I write fan fiction on a very regular basis because I find it to be very relaxing. It's super nerdy, and I've been doing it since middle school, and that's how I ended up with my name being what it is. It actually is from anime, which I was into, still am into. But in a way, it kind of accidentally prepared me for this opportunity. I had been writing fan fiction since I was a kid. And so the reason I do it, one, it's fun. Two, it also is really good practice because if you're writing regularly, I know a lot of authors, like I said, Glenn, Milton, Linda, all of them are people who produce a lot of content and it's very dense. It's easier for me. He joked about what I do when I'm not writing. I actually am an administrative assistant. And so that does allows me to write, but I use fan fiction to kind of keep my skills sharp. So if I have periods where I'm not writing a current chapter or a scene or what have you, that's the other thing that kind of keeps me making sure I'm not losing my edge. Because even though you're writing for fun and for entertainment, it still is a little bit of a challenge to nail the voice of whichever property you're writing about. And I actually do happen to write fan fiction about Marvel comics, about Marvel characters in the MCU and the Dresden Files, a couple other things. And so that, when I was given this particular opportunity, I was like, okay, cool. So I need to know about Wakanda. I need to know about Okoye. I need to know about the Dora. And so I kind of went behind and reading about the things that they've done, seeing the different comics that were really popular that hit with different people, it sort of allowed me to absorb the voice and to get ready for what it needed to sound like, what it needed to feel like on the page. And then I did borrow just a little bit from the films in terms of Denai Guerrero's delivery of Okoye, and that she.
Oh, it looks like we lost it for a second. Well, hopefully she'll come back to us. Somebody else want to jump in?
Well, for me, it was just the opposite. And like I said, I'm an indie writer, so I'm just used to writing my own worlds. So to have to kind of write into someone else's world was challenging for me. So much so that I have the distinction of being the only person whose idea was rejected when they first submitted it. Jesse said, "Hey man, your stuff got rejected, but it wasn't because of the content of the story. It was because I went somewhere that the Marvel powers that be did not want me to go. I started my story in a place that they technically did not want anybody to write in. So I had to, and to be honest, at that point, I was kind of like, well, Jesse, I don't know if I need to be in this because that was the ideal I wanted to write. But I thought about, he was very encouraging. So I thought about it and I said, okay, well, I can actually move this up a little bit and put it into another scenario. But because it was about Bashenga and there wasn't a lot of stuff about him and the Wakanda world during his time period, I had a lot of freedom. So that's what helped me to be able to write the story, because I was able to really jump into my old sword and soul, playground and start pulling from these different cultures and creating this story from that. So as I finished the stories, I sent it to Jesse and he would send it to the people and they come back with some stuff like, well, why is this like this? Maybe you want to change that kind of stuff. So it wasn't as restricting as I thought it was going to be. And I think it's because of the fact of the character that I chose, which is probably part of the reason I chose it. But also too, I came in kind of late in the game and he said, look, I got Dora Milaje stories. I got T'Challa stories. He said, now I don't have anything about M'Baku, which I almost wrote something about. I really thought about M'Baku. But then I saw Bashenga and I was like, yeah, this is the guy right here. This is the guy I want to talk about, because he's coming in a time where the Panther clan hadn't really established themselves as being the dominant people over the mountain and handling vibranium. So my story is kind of about him trying to establish their dominance in this area, and actually about him having some doubt about whether or not their clan was worthy enough to handle this responsibility. You know, so that's what that was fun to me about it, and it worked out. You know, it worked out pretty good.
I think Kyoko's back. You got cut off. Did you want to finish?
I did. I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have an old janky laptop and I had it unplugged because it was at 50%. Apparently 50% is deaf. So it died in mid-sentence. So I plugged the battery back in and it's alive again. But that's I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's good. Well, if you don't have anything else to add, it's fine. I think Glenn hadn't answered yet.
Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
Okay.
Did you say Glenn or Linda? They both sound the same.
Oh, so sorry.
Go ahead, Glenn.
All right.
You have a better beard than me. Do it.
So writing in another universe, another genre, was sort of interesting for me. And I kind of threw my story in before I think Jesse really had guidelines. I think he kind of didn't see me coming. So I submitted to him sort of blindly. And I said, let me do something that can't get me into trouble. And I want to tell a little bit on Milton. Milton's story got rejected because he was too much on the nose. It's like he was in the writer's room. They said, wait a minute, this guy's too close. We can't have this. That's what happened with Milton's story. He was just too close to what they were already doing. So Milton could tell you what he was going to write about, but then he'd have to kill you. What I did was I thought of an ancestor of T'Challa, and I thought of an inflection point just before World War I, when there are a lot of things popping. You had sort of a change in the politics of the United States. Harriet Tubman was nearing the end of her life on her deathbed. The Titanic had just sunken. Madame Curie had been developing and discovering radiation. Albert Einstein was getting past his education and becoming prominent with his theory of relativity. And I thought it would be an interesting point to insert where Wakanda was at that time. And Wakanda had already conquered the skies. They had already conquered many of the diseases that we battled through the 20th century. And they were a superpower dealing with another superpower, much the way the US has dealt with the Soviet Union and China, and balanced that nuclear dance that went on from the 60s through the 90s or so. But Wakanda had to do it and still stay secret. And I wanted the royalty of all the kingdoms of Africa to be aware of Wakanda and hold it as a secret for all these centuries. And then I wanted to throw in a bombshell that they actually knew about slavery and actually had engineered some of that for a reason. So, I put a lot of stuff into that story that was a little different. And then, of course, as in all my stories, I put some romance in it. I hope I pulled it off. But I always like to have something personal in my stories. But it was fun writing in a different genre, and I just wanted to make sure that I stayed away from as much as they might be working on right now by going back over 100 years to write it. And like Milton came with the same kind of idea.
Yeah, I was about to say, you didn't want to make the same mistake as Milton, obviously.
I wasn't good enough to make the same mistake as Milton.
Seeing the future all the time. So I just wanted to say quickly about my story.
Yes.
I did not have the experience that Kyoko had. So when I'm sorry about the slow name. I'm just like weird about saying things that aren't, I can't even say my own name on a good day anyway. So anyone who's met me knows that women warriors, kind of my thing, love it as a concept. You know what I'm saying? I just walk into Walmart like that. Like what?
Right.
What? Anyway, so when I thought about doing something, I was just so curious about what it's like to be 14, coming into the Golden City from some little village and being trained as a Dora Milaje. So, you know, that is where I hooked into for mine. And there wasn't a lot in the comic books about how they train, or the movies actually. So I created all of that by simply looking at the weapons they use and then going and doing the research for real, how to use the short sword. Everything you see in there in the talk of their interaction is real stuff that I had to figure out. Someone actually asked me, like, you must be really like very agile. And I was like, nope, I'm just really good with Google. I'm just saying, and YouTube. So, and I also threw in one of the things that I'm lately obsessed with, and that is multiple infinite realities. So I wanted to play with that. And always for me, characters it's about the character, what they want, what they're willing to pay in order to get it, and what they're not willing to pay for.
Your story was particularly challenging to me because I got scared. I was like, if that happened to me, somebody entered my dreams, that'd be a little bit too much for me. But you did all this research in 7 days? That's what I heard.
I'm telling you, I wanted to stop. I was like, maybe I can write without the research, but I've been doing that for 40 years. I need it. Like, because it's like this math science part of me, you know, I'm like quantum physics forever. And then there's this crazy creative side, and they feed each other. So yeah, it was like write for half an hour, read Google for half an hour, sleep for 2 hours. That's what I did for 7 days. I didn't do anything else. And I ate a little bit.
Wow. Well, that's why y'all do what you do. You know what I'm saying? And that's amazing. Well, I have a lot more questions, but we don't have time to get to all of them. So I just want to leave this part with one more question, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. And it's really just for you to share with the audience what projects you're currently working on and when we can look forward to seeing them.
Well, I'm sorry. So I have a science fiction novel that's being published by Outland Entertainment, hopefully later on this year. I'm working with my editor right now on that, plus the prequel and sequel to it. We may actually develop a comic book from it as well. And it's sprung from the novel that I wrote 25 years ago that I've reworked. And hopefully everybody will enjoy it when it comes out. When I write, I like to write a balance between male and female characters. It's never something that I did consciously, I think, but all of my stories are almost perfectly balanced between male and female characters. And they balance each other very well in terms of strength and ability and mores and so on and so forth. So I'm hoping that I continue to write these kinds of things and learn from some of my co-authors. Linda has been, just a spectacular mentor to me, even though she doesn't know it. she's given lessons and she doesn't even know it. It's great to develop characters, and that's one of the things that I enjoy more than anything when I write, is to develop a character that you can get into, a character that you can believe, a character that's not like every other character, and a character that's not flat. I don't like flat characters. I like three-dimensional characters with a backstory. Even if I don't tell you the backstory, you know it's there.
If that's I'll jump in here. So I have 2 series. One's complete. It's called the Black Parade series. So there's 5 books in that, and those are available. And the first one is you can download for free on Amazon or Smashwords. The current series that I'm writing is the Of Cinder and Bones series. It is a science fiction contemporary fantasy series about dragons used to exist and they were hunted to extinction until 2 MIT scientists figure out how to clone them and bring them back to life. But only for the purpose of studying the creatures and figuring out what their impact on the environment was. It's all conservation based and science based. It's not Jurassic Park where we were going to exploit them for money. Unfortunately, someone did exactly that. They stole the dragon and decided that they were going to try to clone it themselves for profit. And so Jack and Kamala go to Tokyo to try and get their dragon back. That's the basic premise. So I am actually working on the 5th book in that series. And that's due spring 2022 if I can manage it. But I mean, it's going pretty well so far. And so I think it'll definitely be ready by 2022. The other thing I wanted to mention is my friend Milton Davis, who's my other surrogate father when he has time. And I are part of this wonderful science fiction anthology called Cyberpunk. It was actually just, yep, he's got it right there. And actually my copy is in my room as an artifact. I've been reading a little bit. Yep. And so he and I have both written stories, and that there's some other really, really fantastic people like Joe Coleman and Nicole Kurtz, other names like that. And that's just published. So it's available through his website, which he put down in the chat. Really excellent stories. I encourage you all to check that out as well, especially if you like the Black Panther anthology. You will definitely love Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk. It's a wonderful, wonderful collection of stories.
Thank you.
So I just got this in the mail yesterday, and honestly, giggling is not even the beginning of my reaction to it. I'm in Fantasy and Science, the magazine, the Fantasy and Science Fiction. Which, by the way, yeah, one of our, our Black Panther Tales of Wakanda folks is in here too. Daniel Daryl Jerry's in here too. What? Oh. So, after that one was on my bucket list for like ever, and I collected rejections for quite a while. So this is my first. I'm very excited about that. I have a poem in here that Octavia Butler whispered to me. And it's dedicated to her. Another big one, Weird Tales.
Oh yeah.
Been around forever. What? Okay, I got a poem in here. And it's dark. I'm saying that's how I roll sometimes, often. So I'm working on novels because all these folks do novels, and I've got like all these things in anthologies and stuff, but I'm doing my first novel right now. So we'll see. I need to finish it and get it going out there before I talk about it. But I'm in awe of all of you. Especially Kyoko. Oh my God, you.
Thank you.
Your series are breathtaking, and Milton knows. Milton and I go way back, too far. Love you, Glenn.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I never mentioned my titles, and I guess I'm a little slow on the uptake on that. So the Renaissance of Aspirin is my medical fiction series or novel, and the mystery doc. Dragon's Air, the Ifu Legacy is my science fiction series. And I wrote a story in Where the Veil is Thin, which is a story of fairies and fantasy. And lastly, I guess, is Unbitten, a vampire dream. So I kind of write in different genres, and I'm all over the place.
Well, I don't have time to talk about all my projects, but I'm just going to be honest. I'll just talk about the one that Kyoko M mentioned, Cyberpunk Anthology, collection of stories of Afrocentric cyberpunk stories. Things have been on my mind for a while. We finally got a chance to roll it out, so please check that out. I also just released a novel by B. Sharice Moore called Dr. Marvelous Jen's Art Scholars, which is a steampunk, diesel funk, magic realism, historical fiction novel, which is amazing. So we're doing the pre-orders about that right now. And I'm working with a team of creators that we're actually working on a cyberpunk animation series called Playing the Odds, which is based on a novella that I wrote and released earlier this year. And it's moving right along here. So hopefully, if things go well, hopefully you guys will get a chance to see the series somewhere. So that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Well,
Like I said, when we got in here, he needs to clone himself. He has like 900 projects going at once.
Always has, always has. Also, I have a poem with art, and I'm reading the poem in Red Spring Curating the End of the World that came out.
well, y'all look like you're really busy. I just like to say thank you so much for entertaining my questions. We do have some time left for some questions from the audience if you are willing. I know that Candy Tate will be able to handle that. I just like to say thank you again, and silent round of applause on Zoom. Thank you. Dr. Tate, are you ready to?
I'm ready to rock and roll with some questions. We had some in the chat, and again, we want to keep the audio clean. So if you'll keep yourselves on mute and use the raise your hand function, and we'll call you out, and then you can unmute and ask your question away. Ask away. Someone have something burning? Some burning question. Anthony Parris. Do I need to, I think I have to ask you to unmute. There you are.
Everybody hear me okay? Everyone can hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, great. Hi everyone. My name is Anthony Parris from Buffalo, New York. Got my novel right here. I'm only 2 stories in, but I'm getting there. I'm working on it. Been a fantastic panel so far. So my question is, I'm currently reading the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda. So with that series coming to a conclusion, they haven't really decided what they're gonna do with it, or they haven't really announced what direction it's gonna go. But has anyone thought of any stories just by reading it, if you are reading it, or do you see yourself writing a story about Wakanda State?
I think that the way that we did on the anthology is that basically everything that we're doing is based on the comic universe. What happens beyond that, that's going to be kind of dictated by Marvel, if they want to go further and if they want to do an anthology on that. The concept of Wakanda being an intergalactic empire is very interesting. You can see the evolution of it. A lot of things would have to happen between Wakanda being as it is now and reaching a point to become that level, which probably would mean I know there's, I think, I don't know remember who wrote the book that talks about it, but it would have to be something that would include Wakanda becoming more of a world dominant power than it is right now. But it is an interesting premise, and it would be interesting to see how they use vibranium to achieve that goal. I think there's a lot of stuff about, and this is just my experience with the universe. I don't think the concept of vibranium, beyond being something that gives the Black Panther enhanced powers and creating very strong metals, I don't really think that's been explored as much as it should be. Being a chemist, I've got all kind of ideals, but they come with a bill, so I just leave it at that.
Anyone else want to jump in? Our panelists. In the chat, we have a question from Roderick Faulkner. It says, what rationale do you imagine is why Wakanda didn't interface with the transatlantic slave trade? Glenn, help us out.
You're still on mute, Glenn.
Hold on. Let's see if I can find you, unmute you. There you are.
All right, yeah.
There you are.
Okay. First of all, I got to salute my brother, Anthony Parris from Buffalo, New York. I went to medical school up in Buffalo, so I remember those winters very well. But yeah, I actually touched a little bit on the slave trade in my story, The Underside of Darkness. Wakanda actually allowed for the slave trade in order to spread war dogs into every nation on earth that actually engaged slaves. And they lived to regret that. They expected slavery to be what it had been in other civilized cultures in history, where slaves were used to the top of their game. If they were intellectuals, they were used as teachers and professors, mathematicians, doctors, etc. But the change in slavery that took place during the transatlantic slave trade was something that's never been seen in history before, and I wanted to point that out. When people talk about slavery has always been here in one form or another, yes, it has, but it was never this abomination that developed 400 years ago and got worse and worse every single year. So yeah, that is something that I wanted to address. And you'd have to, a nation as powerful as Wakanda, you couldn't imagine that they weren't aware of it, and why would they allow it? And I offer a little bit of a story of how they allowed it and why they allowed it, and that there is a little bit of hope buried in that horrible practice of slavery.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, folks are formulating theirs. I have one to ask. You're with Asala trying to reach out to younger people. And we heard the kind of the origin stories of how you got into this genre. What can we do to get more kids interested in reading and learning about Wakanda, the future, as well as the history of the past?
I think doing things like this are a good start, especially so panels, doing readings in your local areas, being on social media and encouraging that, I think is a good step to start. But like I said, I think a lot of it comes from, if possible, at home. Encouraging kids to read and to read things that they like. You always, have assigned things that they get from public school or for a private school, things like that. But just encouraging whatever that habit is can open their minds up to understanding that there are different things out there. And same thing with writing. Writing is very scary when you're young because you have so many different writers that you draw from. And a lot of the times you start out trying to sound like a really cool person that you read. I think a lot of people are like that. But just, and that's where I got help a lot was, I would say halfway through middle school, my writing had started to evolve when I was turning in essays. And about 10th grade, my teacher, Heather Held, who I still keep in contact with because she's a great lady. She had started to really encourage me to continue writing, even though I was just, writing about English books that we had. And then when I went to the next grade, I had Stephanie Timmons. And she did the same thing. She noted that I had a proficiency, particularly in how I wrote, and she encouraged me to do that. And then next year after that, I got Holly Jean Carter, and same thing. She saw my skills and encouraged me to do that. And so a lot of it can come from the education side as well, is reminding people that when you see that spark to help it grow. No matter what the subject is, because that can expand them out and grow their minds to want to do those sort of things when they get older.
And I wanted to just tell I'm going to do this as fast as I can, little cute story. When after the book release was available to the world, we all knew we had to sit on it for a little bit. I was at the supermarket and we all had our mask on, and kids are always looking at me because I got like a blue, purple, green mohawk. And that's all good. And this little brown kid was in a shopping cart checking out with his, elders, like not older, but I'm just saying, he's like, I don't know how old. And he had like a Marvel t-shirt on and he's staring at my hair. So as I go by, I said to him and them, I said, do you know there's a book coming out with Black Panther? And he had Black Panther on his Black Panther stories in it. And they didn't because it had just been announced. And he's like, his eyes got really big. And I was like, yeah. And do you know who wrote a story that's in that book? And I said, this girl. And then they were like, what? And then I was like, that wasn't the point. The point was, because I got awards if my ego is hungry. You know what I'm saying? So the point that I went into this story with was to say, And I said to him, and you know who else could write a story that could be in a book about Black Panther or anything else they want? And I pointed at that little boy. And then I left. So I'm packing my car up with my stuff, and I hear from across the thing, Linda, because I told him my name, Linda, and it's him and them, and they're all waving at me. I'm just saying, one at a time. You got to turn them.
One at a time, one at a time.
We used to be very systematic about it when we first started. We would actually give events that we would invite parents to bring their kids to learn about speculative fiction. We did an event about 7 years ago with the Wren's Nest, where we had an entire day where the parents brought their kids to the event. We had authors there, we had artists there, and we divided them into two groups. The authors, we gave them an idea to write, and they worked on it, and we looked at it, and then at the end, all of them got a chance to stand up and read their stories. And it was cool because some of them got together and decided to act out a person's story and stuff like that. And then we had all the artists basically draw their pictures, and they showed us what they were drawing and what they were talking about. We did another event with the Auburn Avenue Research Library where we did something similar, where we invited parents to bring their kids and to talk to them about speculative fiction and encourage them to be imaginative when they think about stuff like that. So, and I never turned down an invitation to a school. Whenever people ask me to come speak to kids, I always go there. I did one where I ended up unbeknownst to me, I became the Black History program of the day. I was supposed to be speaking to an accelerated class of fifth graders, and they told me to wait in the library, and next thing you know, all the fifth graders came in from the entire school, and I had to do a presentation on Black history. But it was cool because it was for the kids and that kind of thing. So, I think that providing, making ourselves available for situations, for opportunities like that, doing festivals that sometimes that are outside of Black speculative fiction, because there are people that are in those areas that are into it, but they don't necessarily participate at the Dragon Cons and stuff like that. So it's something that we used to do a lot back in the day, and it's something that we were talking. Matter of fact, we're just talking about it last week, that we said, well, we need to get back into this because we need to, be there to encourage and that creativity.
Grow that next generation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say real quick, over the years, I have gone to elementary schools. When I was in New York, I went to one in the Bronx. It was so tough. They had to have a guard meet me at the door and take me to the classroom. I was like, I grew up in Philly and not great neighborhoods. I was like, okay, whatever. But when I go, I always do writing things with them. I do reading things with them. I always take a Bram Stoker with me, which is the award the horror writers give. The door opens, your name and books in it. And I just pass it around. I just give it to the first kid and I keep talking and I tell them to pass it around because I want them to understand that you can hold this, you can have this. They need to see all of our faces, all the different shades of brown to know you can do this, because I grew up without a lot of that, but I had teachers who did show me some like that. So.
See, each one teach one.
I think Black kids need role models and examples to understand that they can do certain things. I went to school in the Bronx, and I can remember my guidance counselor telling me, you probably can't be a physician. You might be able to be a postal worker or a social worker, or maybe a teacher, but you're never going to be a doctor. And I'm thinking, this is the Bronx High School of Science. I had good grades. I could be anything I want to be. And, I did, basically what I wanted to do because I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to be able to do it. But again, exceptionalism shouldn't be an exception. It really needs to be driven home that this is within all of us. And holding a Bram Stoker award, for example, is going to resonate with that kid probably for decades. Mm-hmm. After all of us are long gone, well, not Kyoko, but after the rest of us are gone. This does have to be passed on to the younger generations, and we need to meet them where they are. What kind of stories do they want to tell What do they want to hear? And that's what they should write. And we need to help them write that.
Excellent, excellent. There was another question in the chat. I think we have time for, with the intergalactic empire of Wakanda coming to a close, has any thought been given to building stories around within the universe where Wakanda spans 5 galaxies?
If Marvel is smart enough to recognize the size of the market that they're sitting on, they would let us loose. They would unleash us. I mean, I think that anybody in this panel could probably write a trilogy of movies that would make a ton of money and inspire a generation of writers and creators. Any single one of us on this panel, and any one of us in that book, and so many more that haven't had a chance to voice their creativity.
Then I'm going to bring you back in and ask you a question. In this being your area of collecting, how do we build this at Emory? How do we build more?
How do we build more collections like this?
Collections around Afrofuturism. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it starts with programs like this, where we build relationships with some of the most prominent writers in the field. And that's who's represented here this evening. I was excited, not just because I like reading the material of these authors, but also because we get to share with everyone just how talented and dynamic they really are. You heard a lot of different kinds of expertise that find their ways into the stories, whether it's coming into it as a poet or as a scientist or as a doctor, or some other way of engaging the material that brings you into the historical backdrop and somehow finds its way into the future. It's just an amazing way of bringing knowledge to people. And so I think it starts there. Collecting is not the main objective. The objective is for us to make sure that people are aware of the great work that these people do. And so if the Stuart Rose Library can play a role in getting that message out, I'm here for it all the way. So I'm just thankful to be here with y'all.
Great, great, great. Does someone want to follow up? And then this last question is around how do we invest in the anthology? And I've seen websites go in the chat, and where do we go buy the book? So someone help do a little marketing here at the
end. The anthology is available anywhere books are sold. You can get it on Amazon, you can get it at Barnes and Nobles, you can get it literally anywhere books are sold. Just do your, Google is your friend.
And say it makes a great gift. Huh?
And tell everybody. Because I've been doing like every other week a panel, every other day it feels like a panel interview because of this Grand Master Award, I think more than anything else. And it's not a whole lot of brown people necessarily in these things, but I'm always telling people, buy it. It's fun. It's cool. You're going to have a great time. There's no pictures. I always have to say this, not comics, but just like, and then I'm that person because I'm the oldest of 9. I'm like, why have you not bought it? What's wrong with you? Milton knows me. Milton. That's how I roll.
Yeah, I have to give it to Linda. Linda is one of the most supportive people in this industry. For
I ain't even playing. I ain't playing. Your book. What is your book? Amber, your child book. Love that book. Why hasn't everybody here bought that book for somebody they know younger? What's wrong with you people?
I do. I was going to say, so over the last few months, especially with COVID and kids being inside, I've seen a few threads where people were asking specifically for stories for children that were written in the African diaspora. And I recommended Milton a couple times because of the Amber series. It has an excellent reputation. And like I said, it has berries for who it's appropriate for as well. So
it's a wide, every author in this anthology is a great author and has a library behind them. So don't stop with this anthology. Look these authors up, find out what else they've created. Like I said, it's a great collection. Jesse did a good job at getting a wide range of authors and from different parts of, mainstream published authors, indie published authors, well-known established authors, brand new authors. One of the distinctions that we have here in Atlanta is that the three of us, Glenn, Kyoko M, and I, are all indie authors. And it's not often that we get opportunities to participate in something like this, but it gives it tells you about the quality of the work and the fact that how Atlanta stands as far as the speculative fiction market is concerned. But yeah, it's a great book. It's, every story in there is a hit. And again, Google's your friend.
And it's not just for kids. I tell that people all the time. Yes, young adults will love this, and so will grown-up adults. Just get with the program.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, again, we thank you all for being with us this evening. Thank our guests for coming in on a Friday evening, and that just really inspires us more to do more of this. And a special thanks to the library and my colleagues that have helped us out with some technical issues behind the scenes and making this happen and marketing. It takes, as they say, it takes a village. Good to see some friends. Sue Ross, good to see you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tate, Dr. Fluker.
Yes.
And of course, it's always a pleasure. Madam Linda Addison and Kyoko M, and of course, my buddy, Milton Davis.
And especially
Jesse Hollins, Professor Jesse Hollins.
Yeah.
Kim is everything. Stop it. You guys don't even know. The goddess herself.
They say you all be fruitful. Go give a book to somebody. Tell them to read it. Take care and be safe out there.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Thanks.